Imagine Earth as a physical vessel floating in a void. We receive a constant influx of solar radiation from space, driving our climate and weather systems. But structurally, the imports stop there. Earth receives zero new chemical mass. Because our total planetary mass is fixed, you cannot summon new material. Every carbon, nitrogen, or oxygen atom required to build a living organism must be borrowed from the immediate environment. This creates the requirement for biogeochemical cycles, the continuous, cyclical pathways that route foundational elements out of the non-living environment, pull them into living organisms, and eventually push them back out again. To sustain continuous, high-volume biological growth without depleting its raw materials, Earth operates as a planetary-scale chemical recycling plant. Every cycle operates in two distinct phases: the abiotic phase, which includes the non-living environment like air, water, and rock, and the biotic phase, which is the organic food chain. Elements do not simply drift across this boundary at random. Pulling an atom out of a rock and forcing it into a leaf requires specific, energy-intensive chemical mechanisms. The speed at which these elements distribute across the globe depends on the physical state of their primary abiotic reservoir. Earth utilizes two distinct logistical networks to move matter: the high-speed gaseous engine and the geologically constrained sedimentary engine. Whether an element's reservoir is a freely moving gas or locked inside solid rock dictates the growth limits of the entire biosphere. Gaseous cycles manage elements like carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. Because their main reservoirs are the atmosphere and oceans, they allow for rapid global distribution. In the carbon cycle, the air is the primary reservoir, yet carbon dioxide makes up merely 0.03% of the atmosphere. To enter the biotic phase, this carbon is captured through photosynthesis, where green plants physically trap atmospheric CO2. This chemical equation acts as a mechanism for change. 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and water are broken and reassembled to force inorganic carbon into organic glucose. This glucose is a biological battery, cascading up the food chain to herbivores and carnivores. Carbon flows back to the abiotic system, pushed out by the biological respiration of living animals and the microbial decomposition of dead bodies. However, carbon sequestered in dense plant matter can bypass this slow decomposition process when subjected to combustion. Massive forest fires act as a rapid shortcut, stripping stored biological carbon from the wood and returning it directly to the atmospheric reservoir as CO2. Human extraction and combustion of fossilized plant matter, like coal, is an artificial bypass of the natural carbon cycle. Gaseous cycles act as the fast track of the biosphere, redistributing vast amounts of physical mass globally in a matter of days or weeks. Nitrogen presents a logistical hurdle. Although the atmosphere is 79% nitrogen, plants cannot utilize it in its free gaseous form. This creates a fixation bottleneck. To be biologically useful, inert N2 gas must be broken and converted into soluble nitrates. One method is electrochemical fixation, where a lightning strike possesses enough energy to tear atmospheric nitrogen bonds apart in midair. This chart compares fixation efficiency. Lightning yields a mere 35 milligrams of nitrate per square meter annually, but biological fixation by microorganisms scales up significantly, yielding up to 700 milligrams, and in fertile zones exceeding 20,000. Once incorporated into plants and animals, the nitrogen hits decomposers. Through amylonification, these decomposers convert the proteins of dead bodies into ammonia. The cycle finally closes via denitrification. Bacteria like Pseudomonas strip the oxygen from nitrates for energy, venting the leftover nitrogen gas back to the sky. Biological growth is restricted not by the volume of nitrogen in the environment, but by the microbial labor required to make it usable. By contrast, sedimentary cycles manage heavy elements like phosphorus and sulfur, operating on entirely different physical constraints. Phosphorus has almost no atmospheric presence. Its only major reservoirs are locked within soil and dense rock formations. To break these reserves open, the biosphere relies on physical erosion. This slow process grinds down stone to release ionic phosphate into the soil. Plants absorb this ionic phosphate through their root systems, incorporating it into vital cellular machinery, specifically building blocks like DNA, RNA, and the ATP molecules that power cellular energy. Because there is no gas phase for it to escape into, excess phosphorus pools in physical sinks. It gets locked into the bones of animals or concentrated in bird excreta. Humans bypass this limitation by harvesting these localized physical sinks, like islands piled with bird guano, speeding up the sluggish phosphorus cycle for industrial agriculture. Sedimentary cycles trap biology in the slow lane. Living organisms are at the mercy of localized geological weathering to access these essential nutrients. Sulfur is another sedimentary cycle, acting as a key component for proteins. It is primarily made available as inorganic sulfate through slow soil weathering, but geological ruptures, like volcanoes, bypass the slow weathering process. They vent trapped underground carbanum sulfur directly into the atmosphere. Human industry mirrors this volcanic venting. The incomplete combustion of fossil fuels releases trapped sulfur dioxide into the air. So, while classified as sedimentary, elements like sulfur can be temporarily forced into the fast-moving gaseous phase by geological or industrial events. Every complex organic structure on Earth requires the synchronization of these cycles, bringing carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur together perfectly. You cannot build a DNA molecule without the slow weathering of rock-bound phosphorus intersecting with the rapid global fixation of atmospheric nitrogen. Earth maintains continuous biological production by dividing the labor between these atmospheric and sedimentary distribution networks. The biosphere operates as a closed-loop chemical reactor. Within this system, matter reconfigures across the boundaries of air, rock, and life, ensuring the planetary total remains constant.